The rain had been falling since morning, thin, cold, relentless. At the edge of downtown Chicago, the world blurred through gray windows and flashing traffic lights. Inside a corner deli, a little boy pressed his nose against the glass, watching the sandwiches being stacked one after another. He couldn't have been older than 8. His hoodie was soaked, his shoes leaving small puddles where he stood. But his eyes, those big, honest eyes, were locked on a single ham sandwich, as if it were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Inside the shop, Ethan Miller, the owner, stood behind the counter. A man in his 40s, clean suit, gold watch, and a heart that had grown distant over years of struggle and success. He had built the deli from nothing, long hours, burnt fingers, sleepless nights, and he told himself he had no time for pity. He noticed the boy and frowned. Another kid pretending to be hungry just to get attention, he thought. But the boy didn't move. He just stared, one hand pressed against his stomach, the other clutching a torn backpack. When Ethan finally opened the door to take out the trash, the boy stepped back quickly. "Hey, kid, you waiting for someone?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. The boy shook his head. "No, sir." "You can't stand here all day." "I know," the boy said softly, looking down. "I just like the smell." Ethan froze for a moment. The answer caught him off guard. "The smell?" The boy nodded, shyly. "It helps me forget I'm hungry, just for a little." Ethan didn't reply. He turned, muttered something under his breath, and went back inside. But his hands trembled slightly as he wrapped the next sandwich. 15 minutes later, he stepped outside again, this time holding a paper bag. "Here," he said, thrusting it toward the boy. "Take it before I change my mind." The boy's eyes widened. "For me?" "No," Ethan said dryly. "For the invisible friend standing behind you, of course for you." The boy smiled, the kind of smile that could melt stone. "Thank you, sir." He sat down on the wet curb and opened the bag. The steam from the warm sandwich fogged his face. He didn't eat fast. He ate like it was sacred, bite by small bite. Ethan watched from the doorway, something twisting in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Caleb," the boy said, between bites. "My mom says names mean something." "Yeah?" Ethan said. "What's yours mean?" "She said Caleb means faithful, like, don't give up." Ethan didn't know what to say. He just nodded and went back inside. But that night, when he closed the shop, the image of the boy stayed with him. The rain, the soaked hoodie, and those small hands holding on to a paper bag like it was treasure. The next morning, Ethan came early. He made an extra sandwich, turkey and cheese, just the way kids liked it, and placed it near the counter. He told himself he didn't care if the boy came back, but part of him waited. And sure enough, around 8:30, Caleb appeared at the window again. He didn't knock, didn't ask, just stood there, smiling shyly. Ethan opened the door. "You're back." "Only for the smell," Caleb grinned. Yeah, Ethan nuttered, handing him the new sandwich. "Can I pay you later?" the boy asked suddenly. Ethan blinked. "Pay me? With what?" The boy pulled a few coins from his pocket, barely 50 cents. "It's all I have, but Mom says never take something for nothing." Ethan stared at the coins. He wanted to refuse, but something in the boy's voice stopped him. He took one coin gently and handed the rest back. "Deal," he said. "Now go eat before it gets cold." Days passed. Caleb came every morning, sometimes with stories about his school, sometimes about his mom, who worked double shifts cleaning offices across town. One morning, Ethan noticed bruises on Caleb's arm. Faint, purple, fading. "You okay, kid?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," Caleb said quickly. "Just fell." But his eyes told another story. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his apartment, staring at the city lights. He had once been a father, years ago, before his divorce, before his business consumed him. His son, Liam, would have been Caleb's age now, if he were still alive. The thought hit him like a punch. He had buried that pain deep, pretending work could fill the emptiness. But this small boy, with his courage and politeness, had cracked the wall open. The next day, Caleb didn't come, nor the next. By the third day, Ethan found himself pacing outside, scanning every passing child. On the fourth morning, he saw a familiar backpack, torn, faded, near the bus stop. Caleb sat on the curb again, but this time his face was pale. Ethan knelt beside him. "Hey, buddy, you sick?" "Yeah," Caleb nodded weakly. "Mom's been working too much. We ran out of food again, but it's okay. She says God's testing us." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Without another word, he lifted the boy into his truck and drove straight to his mother's apartment. The building was old, cracked walls, leaking ceiling. A woman opened the door, eyes tired, hands trembling. "Can I help you?" she asked, nervously. Ethan introduced himself. He explained everything, the sandwiches, the conversations, the smiles. Tears filled her eyes. "You've been feeding my son?" Ethan shook his head softly. "He's been feeding me." Silence filled the room. Then, without a word, she hugged her son tight. Ethan placed a small envelope on the table. "Consider this a start," he said. "Your rent's covered for the next 3 months. I won't take no for an answer." She tried to protest, but he simply smiled and added, "You do the same if our roles were reversed." That evening, as Ethan closed his shop, he looked at the empty stool near the window, the one where Caleb used to sit. He hung a small sign above it, "Reserved for Caleb, the boy who taught me how to feed a soul." And every night after that, he made one extra sandwich, not for business, for reminder. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can fill the hungriest heart, even the one you didn't know was empty. The smell of freshly baked bread still filled the tiny deli every morning. But the man behind the counter wasn't as quick anymore. Ethan Meller had grown older, slower, but he never forgot to make one extra sandwich, the one labeled for Caleb. It had been nearly a year since Caleb and his mother moved to a new neighborhood. They still visited sometimes, smiling, always leaving a little note or flower on the counter. But lately, Ethan hadn't seen them for weeks. He told himself they were fine. He told himself he didn't worry. But every day, as the bell above the door stayed silent, his heart felt a little heavier. The rain outside returned, just like the day he first met Caleb. Ethan stared out the window, remembering that small, shivering boy who once stood exactly there. A quiet ache filled the shop. Then, the door opened, but it wasn't Caleb. A young woman in a hospital uniform walked in, carrying a damp envelope. "Mr. Miller?" she asked softly. "Yes," Ethan replied, confused. She smiled faintly. "I'm a nurse at St. Joseph's Children's Hospital. Caleb asked me to give you this." For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. "Caleb? Is he okay?" The nurse's eyes lowered. "He's been very brave." Ethan locked the door and sat down, his hands trembling as he opened the envelope. The handwriting was small but neat. "Dear Mr. Ethan, I hope you're not mad I haven't visited. Mom's been staying with me at the hospital. They say I'll get better soon, but sometimes I feel really tired. Remember how you said kindness never expires? I think you were right. Every time the nurses bring food, I remember your sandwich. Not because it was big, but because it made me feel seen. I'm not scared anymore, Mr. Ethan. I just don't want Mom to cry. If I can't come to your shop again, promise me you'll still make that extra sandwich. Maybe give it to someone else who's hungry, because that's what kindness does. It travels. Love, Caleb." Ethan read it 3 times before the words truly hit him. Then he broke down. The deli, once filled with warmth and laughter, echoed with quiet sobs. The next morning, Ethan went to the hospital. He found Caleb's mother sitting outside room 212, holding a stuffed bear. Her eyes were red, but gentle. She stood when she saw him. "He'll be happy you came." Ethan entered quietly. Caleb lay in bed, thinner, paler, but his eyes still carried that same spark, that same faithful smile. "Hey, partner," Ethan said, forcing a grin. "You still owe me a sandwich coin." Caleb chuckled weakly. "I'll pay you double when I get out." Ethan sat beside him, holding his hand. "You remember the first day we met?" Caleb nodded. "It was raining. You pretended to be angry, but you were nice." Ethan smiled, eyes wet. "You made me remember who I was." For a while, they just sat in silence, two souls connected by something beyond words. The next day, Ethan returned to the shop. He made 2 sandwiches that morning, one for himself and one for Caleb. He placed Caleb's sandwich near the window, just like always. But that night, the phone rang. It was the nurse. Caleb had passed away peacefully, holding his mother's hand. Ethan sat down slowly, the world around him fading. For the first time in years, he prayed, not for himself, but in gratitude for a little boy who had changed his life forever. Life went on, but something in the deli had changed. Ethan started a small board near the counter titled The Kindness Wall. Every customer who bought a sandwich could pay for an extra one for someone who needed it. Soon, the wall filled with colorful notes, photos, and thank yous. Homeless men, students, single mothers, they all came and left smiling. And every morning, Ethan whispered the same words under his breath, "For Caleb." Months passed. One afternoon, a letter arrived, written in the same shaky handwriting as Caleb's, but it wasn't from him. It was from his mother. "Dear Mr. Miller, Caleb told me something before he left. He said, 'When Mr. Ethan gives someone a sandwich, I'll be right there smiling.' I thought you should know. The hospital built a new charity program using the donations you sent in his name. They call it Caleb's Table. It feeds children who can't afford hospital meals. Your kindness really did travel, just like he hoped. With love, Caleb's mom." Ethan held the letter to his chest, tears streaming silently down his face. Outside, the evening sun painted the deli golden. He turned the sign on the window to open, wiped his eyes, and placed one more sandwich on the counter, the best one he had ever made. "For Caleb," he whispered, "because kindness never dies, it only finds new hands to hold."